Lovecraft wrote a lot of cool stories, but he died relatively young, and compared to other weird fiction writers, he didn't write that many. I mean, Clark Ashton Smith wrote almost 200 stories, I think. Who knows what Lovecraft would have written had he lived longer or had more time on his hands. Well, luckily we can actually find out what he could have written. Lovecraft kept with him for many years what is known as a commonplace book. Basically, that's just a notebook in which one jots down anything worth remembering, and in the case of Lovecraft, he used it to write down possible story ideas. And it just so happens I have a book containing passages taken from his commonplace book. So basically in this video I'm just going to list what I think are the better ideas. I can't list them all because, well, there are hundreds of them, and he wrote these down over a period of many years. And hey, if you are a short story writer, this is a perfect time to try your hand using his story ideas. Kind of like a tribute. Finish what the master began, that sort of thing. So, let's take a look at what could have been. So I wasn't exactly sure how I should record my voice for this, because to do individually each entry it would take a long time considering the editing them all together. So I think instead I'm just going to create one audio file, and that will make things much quicker, and then I can upload sooner. So basically I'm just going to read to you as I would read to any person sitting in the same room. It's no bedtime story, so don't fall asleep, okay? Okay, let's start. Man dreams of falling, found on floor mangled as though falling from a vast height. The man who would not sleep, dares not sleep, takes drugs to keep himself awake, finally falls asleep and something happens. So basically here he's come up with the idea of Nightmare on Elm Street decades before those films were actually made. So there you go, guys. Lovecraft invented Nightmare on Elm Street. Death, its desolation and horror, bleak spaces, sea bottom, dead cities, but life, the greater horror. Vast unheard of reptiles and leviathans, hideous beasts of prehistoric jungle, rank slimy vegetation, evil instincts of primal man. Life is more horrible than death. Wow, Lovecraft must have been having an off day when he wrote that down, huh? Moving away from the earth more swiftly than light, past gradually unfolded, horrible revelation. Fear of mirrors, memory of dream in which scene is altered and climax is hideous surprise at seeing oneself in the water or a mirror. Identity, outsider. Basically that is the outsider. Castle by pool or river. Reflection fixed through centuries. Castle destroyed. Reflection lives to avenge destroyers weirdly. I like how he summarizes that. He's just, the way that story would conclude is that it's just done weirdly. Gotta love Lovecraft. Sinister names. Nasht. Kamantha. I guess you could use those names if you want to write a Mythos story. They sound pretty cool. Man with unnatural face. Oddity of speaking. Found to be a mask. Revelation. That was the Whisperer in Darkness, wasn't it? Rats multiply and exterminate first a single city, and then all mankind. Increased size and intelligence. That sounds like it would be good. Lonely philosopher fond of cat. Hypnotizes it, as it were, by repeatedly talking to it and looking at it. After his death, the cat evinces signs of possessing his personality. NB, he has trained cat and leaves it to a friend with instructions as to fitting a pen to its right forepaw by means of a harness. Later writes with deceased's own handwriting. Oh my god. I bet Lovecraft was having like a slow day, and then he was looking at his cat with a name that we cannot mention in the 21st century, and then he was thinking, you know, I'm gonna die one day and my cat, he's gonna live and I'm gonna possess my cat. This is a bit of a weird story. It doesn't seem very much horror based, but it sounds pretty weird. And of course it's got cats, and Lovecraft was all about cats, but really he's got his cat there and he's like, this guy is tying a pencil to its paw, you know. It's like I don't know, that's really amusing to me. Lost winter day, slept over 20 years. Later, sleep in chair on summer night. False dawn. Old scenery and sensations. Cold. Old persons now dead. Horror. Frozen. Change comes over the sun. Shows objects in strange form. Perhaps restoring landscape of the past. I like that idea. I've seen it in a few video games, you know. where you do something and then the whole scene changes. It's like you go into a shadow world or something like that. That's quite common, and I always like that in games, and I think that would have made a really cool story. Subterranean region beneath placid New England village, inhabited by living or extinct creatures of prehistoric antiquity and strangeness. Old sea tavern now far inland from made land. Strange occurrences, sounds of lapping of waves. That's always cool. I like all his sea stories, so that would have been fun. I'm sure you would have done something there with it. Ancient Negro voodoo wizard in cabin in swamp possesses white man. Oh, that's just one for the SJWs. I bet they would have loved him to write that one. But actually, this is also the premise of another film. I can't remember what it's called, but it has a blonde actress in it, and I think it's like called The Skeleton Key or something like that. I remember that, and that was basically the premise of this. So there you go. Lovecraft predicted another modern horror film. Amazing. Man abandoned by ship, swimming in sea, picked up hours later with strange story of undersea region he has visited. Mad? Castaways on island eat unknown vegetation and become strangely transformed. Individual by some strange process retraces the path of evolution and becomes amphibious. Hideous world superimposed on visible world. Gate through. Power guides narrator to ancient and forbidden book with directions for access. Someone or something cries in fright at the sight of the rising moon, as if it were something strange. I always thought stories were pretty good where something is to be feared, so you have like one character and they fear something that everyone else thinks is like, what's the big deal? If you look at Junji Ito's Uzumaki, you have spirals, right? And you have characters that are terrified of spirals, and then you think from the beginning, like, dude, it's just a spiral, what's the big deal? So in this case, you have the same sort of mentality, saying, why is this guy getting freaked out just because of the moon? It's just the moon. But in real life, well, in reality, in the story, it's something more than that, and that's pretty cool. Explorer enters strange land where some atmospheric quality darkens the sky to virtual blackness. Marvels therein. Vampire dog. What? That's it. That's just the whole entry. Vampire dog. I think it was another one of Lovecraft's off days. Black cat on hill near dark gulf of ancient inn yard. Mew hoarsely. Invites artist to nighted mysteries beyond. Finally dies at advanced age. Haunts dreams of artists. Lures him to follow strange outcome. Never wakes up or makes bizarre discovery of an elder world outside 3-dimension space. That would have been pretty cool. That sounds like it has the most potential out of all of the ones so far. Vague lights, geometrical figures, etc. seen on retina when eyes are closed, caused by rays from other dimensions acting upon optic nerve from other planets, connected with a life or phase of being in which person could live if he only knew how to get there. Man afraid to shut eyes. He has been somewhere on a terrible pilgrimage, and this fearsome seeing faculty remains. Certain kind of deep-toned, stately music of the style of the 1870s or 1880s recalls certain visions of that period. Gas-lit parlors of the dead, moonlight on old floors, decaying business streets with gas lamps, etc., under terrible circumstances. That seems extremely atmospheric, man. I like these stories set in like 1890s, 1870s, that sort of era, Victorian, colonial American times, when technology was still primitive. I like that sort of era, and that could have been really atmospheric, man. The dreams of one man actually create a strange half-mad world of quasi-material substance in another dimension. Another man, also a dreamer, blunders into this world in a dream. What he finds? Intelligence of denizens? Their dependence on their first dreamer. What happens at his death? So basically, a guy dreams of a world, and someone else actually is able to enter that world. But if the first guy dies, what happens? Wasn't it the premise or something similar was mentioned in, what was that film? Inception? I don't know, I haven't watched it. Anyway. A very ancient tomb in the deep woods near where a 17th century Virginian manor house used to be. The undecayed, bloating thing found within. Now that sounds pretty cool. Straight to the point horror story. Inhabitant of another world. Face masked, perhaps with human skin or surgically altered human shape, but body alien beneath robes. Having reached Earth, tries to mix with mankind. Hideous revelation. That sort of sounds like a Plan B Whisperer in Darkness. It also sounds a little bit like Edgar from the first Men in Black. Expedition lost in Antarctic or other weird place. Skeletons and effects found years later. Camera films used but undeveloped. Finders develop and find strange horror. Wow, there you go. So Lovecraft, basically here he came up with the whole found footage genre that popped up ever since Blair Witch. Man, if you don't believe that Lovecraft is a pioneer of horror, here it all is, man. Thing from sea. In dark house, man finds doorknobs, etc., wet as from touch of something. He has been a sea captain and once found a strange temple on a volcanically risen island. Another sea story, and I bet that would have been amazing. Primal mummy in museum. Awakes and changes place with visitor. I don't know if you'll notice in a lot of the Mythos, there's sort of like Arkham horror, the board games, and Call of Cthulhu role-playing games. Mummies play quite a big enough role, and museums as well. And I think it's because Lovecraft spent a lot of time in museums and that sort of thing. So I'm sure that was of great interest to him and sort of was a muse for him, you know, wandering in museums and gazing at all these old artifacts. An odd wound appears on a man's hand suddenly and without apparent cause. Spreads. Consequences. A monstrous derelict found and boarded by a castaway or shipwrecked survivor. Now, isn't that sort of like what Alien was about? I mean, you had the derelict spacecraft, and then it was stumbled onto not by a castaway or shipwrecked survivor, but Kane, the guy that had the chest burster. He went into this derelict. So, man, oh man, you know, this is really amazing to read through this and think about all the modern horror that we have nowadays, and how Lovecraft was, I mean, he had all these ideas in his head, man, you know, and now decades later they're all coming true. It's amazing. Disturbing conviction that all life is only a deceptive dream with some dismal or sinister horror lurking behind. That's basically Gloom Syndrome. If you don't know about Gloom Syndrome, you go and check out my video on that. Well, that's pretty depressing. Insects or other entities from space attack and penetrate a man's head and cause him to remember alien and exotic things. Possible displacement of personality. Anyway, that's my video. Overall, it's really great to see what could have been. And I also have a new appreciation for how active his mind must have been. It's like he was really constantly thinking about the weird and the cosmic while being trapped in the mundanity of reality. And if you're wondering where I'm getting all this information from, or you'd like to read the whole thing, I'm getting it from this book. I got it recently, and now it's one of my most valued purchases in regards to my Lovecraft book collection. And it deserves its own video. I'll probably do a review in sooner or later. Anyway, thanks for watching and stay blasphemous.